Hi, hello, how are you? Fine, great, okay, or you are tired or bored, I don't know. How do you like this TestDive conference? Is it okay? Great, thanks. Elvira, thank you for introducing me. As you already know, my name is Łukasz Kumaszka, and I came here from Wrocław, from Nokia Wrocław, where I've worked for over 10 years, mainly as a tester, also I am a trainer there. And today I want to tell you about acceptance test-driven development. And question to you, who heard about this? Who knows it? Please raise your hands. Yeah, several people, quite good. And who heard or knows TDD, test-driven development? Much more. So basically, what is the difference? Only one letter, A. But in TDD, developers are writing unit tests for the single method in the code. They write a test, then they write a code until the test is passed, then refactor the code, write another test, code refactor, etc., etc. In acceptance test-driven development, we're writing acceptance tests. These are tests for end-to-end functionality, for whole feature. And we were writing them before implementation of the feature. And today I want to tell you a story of my team and our road to ATDD. And this is this team. We are Nokia NetAct Software Manager team. We are developing application called Software Manager. It is application to manage software on radio and core network elements in telecommunication network. By manage, I mean to upload software, to upload information about currently installed software on network element, to download and activate newly software. At the time when we introducing ATDD, there were in the team about 25 people. There were testers, developers, architects, specifier, line manager, product owner. We are cross-functional team. By the way, do you recognize this place in the picture? Yeah, exactly. This is Karpacz, and this picture from our integration trip to Karkonosze Mountains. Okay, we are working in Scrum methodology. We work in 2-week sprints. We've got meetings such as like planning, retrospection, demo, review, product backlog refinement. Our product owner gives us a list of features to implement, divided on user stories. And each user story has its condition of satisfaction, or in other words, acceptance criteria. They tell us what is expected behavior from the user story. And in the past, we've got big problems with quality of our software manager application. This is how our Scrum board looked like at the end of the sprint. And as you see, those red cards doesn't mean it is okay. Those are bugs. And some of those bugs came out during manual testing because developers did not anticipate them. At one moment, we've got so many bugs that we need to stop our development, and each team member was assigned to bug fixing for one whole sprint. Imagine that no one creates something new, and everyone needs to fix the code or fix the test. It wasn't pleasant. Such situations were slowing us down, and we weren't meeting the commitment we had given for the content of the sprint. What was the causes of that? First of all, on product backlog refinement, usually one person was speaking. It was specifier or system architect. Whereas other team members weren't too much interested in listening because they thought that they knew enough about it. But during estimation, it occurred that we haven't got common understanding. Someone estimates that it will be 1 story point, someone gives 5, 13, 20. Condition of satisfaction weren't clear enough without deeper analysis, and they were often changed during the sprint in the middle of the implementation. Sometimes problem was the user story itself. when it was not functional, complicated, and hard to understand. Then it was obvious for us it will be hard to refine, estimate, and create good tests. Because acceptance tests can be created only for user story with functional requirements. Other meetings, like sprint planning, was also done too quickly. We're doing just task splitting without deeper analysis of the feature. We ended up with underestimated tasks and adding tons of tasks on the Scrum board in each sprint. How our sprint looked like. After splitting user story on tasks, developers start to implement the user story. They were implementing until whole functionality is finished. Then testers start to write automated tests. When tests are ready, we start to test our functionality. But most often it occurred that either test or implementation was wrong. If the test was fixed, it found bug in application. If the code was fixed, then it occurred that test was failed because of small code change. After test was fixed, it again appeared that it found another bug in the application, and so on and so on. This endless loop of test and code fixing was very time-consuming, and we weren't often finish our user story on time. And that's how our robot tests looked like. They were hard to understand, hard to read, and in fact, nobody besides testers read them. Neither developer, software architect, nor product owner. Actually, it wasn't even a point to read them because they didn't contain any information about functionality that they test or condition of satisfaction of user story. For example, do you see this line? Can anyone tell me what this line does? Yes, exactly. Something more? Come on. Okay, and who of you look at this and thinks, what the heck is this? Yeah. This is SQL statement that selects ID of software in archive that is not deleted and with given presentation name. But this is simple for someone who knows SQL. And even if I know SQL, it is hard for me to read it. I need 1 minute to take a look and what is this? And does your product owner knows SQL? Does your customer knows SQL? I'm not sure. There were also problem with maintenance of this test. They were hard to understand few months or even few weeks after writing them. Tester other than the author had a big problems with correcting the test. Sometimes the problem was even for the author. I remember when I was asked to fix some tests of my colleagues, and after 3 or 4 hours, I said to my manager, "Hey, maybe it will be a better idea to wait for Grzesiek that he will come back to work tomorrow, because I don't have idea what this test is, and I don't know how to fix it." Usually, testers were spending hours on correcting the test whenever implementation had changed. And this is one of my favorite slides on this presentation. As you can see, not many of us like the idea of introducing ATDD in our development process. Even though our velocity was low, most of us didn't want to change anything following the phrase, "Better is the enemy of good enough." But luckily for us, we've got opportunity to participate in training, Agile Software Development with Craig Lehrman. That was our breakthrough point. We told to ourselves, let's take a step forward. Let's try to change anything. Even though only a small number of team members took part in this training, that was enough to begin changes and to start the process of ATDD in developing our application. After the training, many of us read Gojko Adic's book, following specification by example. Very good book. And we use it in our journey towards ATDD. And how it is look now. Backlog refinements are much different. No more sitting and sleeping. We work in groups and everyone is involved in feature analysis. We draw diagrams, we draw schemas on the boards and even on the walls. We discussed with each other. We compare results of the analysis between groups. What is even better, we don't receive strictly defined user story from product owner, but just some initial descriptions. So together with architects, we create condition of satisfaction and titles of user story. Thanks to this, we've got always functional user story for which we can create acceptance tests. When feature was too complicated or too big to fit in one sprint, we split it to smaller stories using hamburger method. And like the real hamburger, have layers. I don't know, lettuce layer, meat, tomato, cucumber, etc., onion. In the similar way, we divided our application to layer. For example, database layer, business logic layer, user interface layer, and created small tasks in each layer. Small, but giving opportunity to, when added with other tasks from other layers, to create end-to-end functionality. So, the same like you bite hamburger, each layer. The same we bite our hamburger and we receive our first simplified user story, which we can show our customer. Tasks that were left alone or combined evolved in future stories that would add more functionality to the whole feature. On the refinement, we also do a specification by example. This is how the application should respond based on the user input. And it is very important to understand the feature. Most often that was just simple tables with some inputs and outputs, but this was doing for understanding the feature for every team member. And now, when user stories are split well into smaller parts, when conditions of satisfaction are well defined, when specification by example is created, when everyone knows exactly what needs to be done, it's much easier to estimate such a user story. Hey, as you can see, we all estimated the same. That gives us a chance to meet our commitment and finish user story on time. After the refinement on a separate meeting, but still before the sprint starts, we do a test workshop. A group of testers, developers, and architects trying to figure out test scenarios based on specification by example created on the product backlog. And for one test scenario, we created few input values and some expected values. And combination of input values gives us expected values. And each line from here is a separate test case for the test scenario. So, acceptance tests are written. They are done in that form, on the paper, on the board, on the picture. And now, sprint starts. On sprint planning, it is crucial to focus not only on task splitting, but it is good to take a look at those drawings from backlog refinement. It's even better to draw more detailed schemas and diagrams. We were looking at acceptance tests from test workshop. Looking at the code is also worth a try, because you can find some unexpected problems earlier and be prepared for them. It definitely makes not only splitting and estimating tasks easier, but also the implementation. And how our sprint looks now. We still got user story, but now it is well-defined, functional user story with condition of satisfaction that everyone understands. And now, what is new? Attention. Tester, together with developer, write tests in robot framework. They write test scenarios and methods prototypes of methods to communicate between test and the application. And then developers implement those methods called keyword, and this is a very crucial step, because if it's done properly, implementation of the feature is much easier because developers knows exactly what their code needs to do. Testers in that time finish to write those test cases or make changes if it's needed. So now, tests are ready, but they are failing. But it's okay, because the implementation of the feature has not even started. And now, developers write a code, implement the feature, implement the user story, until all tests are passed. Testers in that time help to execute test cases, make changes if it's needed, and also do manual testing for ensure better quality. When every test is green, is passed, we know that we finish our user story and fulfill each condition of satisfaction. And that's what acceptance test-driven development is. Now our test looks much better. They are easy to read for everyone. Like you see in this first table, there are just copy from test workshop inputs and outputs. We just add test case names, and now test scenario is written in natural language. So even customer would know what we are testing, what functionality we are testing, and what he can expect from our application. Like you see, given some preconditions, when some actions, and then expected values. We write this test in HTML because it's easy for everyone to open it in any internet browser, read it, and understand it. After many months or even years, it's easy for us to open this test case, read it, and I know what it tests, and I know what the feature is doing. This test becomes our documentation also. To this HTML files, we add also some description like user story title, like condition of satisfaction, and other things like diagrams that help us to understand the feature. At the end of the sprint, new created tests are green, and they are added to regression suite, which is run every day several times. Regression results are sent automatically by email to all interested team members, and in such a way our regression can point possible bug in future implementation. Like you see, our acceptance tests look like are divided like a book. There's chapters in the book, and we have folders with the name of the functionality. So for us, like I said before, it's easy to find some functionality, read the test, and I know what's done. I remember that some colleagues from other team, which want to test our application and ask me, "Hey, how I should test it manually?" Okay, I will show you the test, and you can read it. And if you don't understand anything, just ask me, and I will tell you. He didn't ask me. And now, maybe not all of us were convinced that ATDD is a better way of getting things done, but definitely most of us. Once initial problems were overcome, more and more people joined this group and see the benefits of using ATDD in our application. It wasn't easy, but we have solved many of our problems. Now tests are much better than the way before. Do you remember this old messy robot test with this SQL statement? They are now easy to read for everyone and easy to understand for everyone. They are also executable specification because they tell us exactly what is expected behavior from the application. They are also easy to maintenance because most often failed test means bug in application. It has been always problem for us to finish user story at the end of the sprint because our definition of done states that automated test also needs to be finished, and when we start them after the code was ready, we've got a little time to do this. Now we start from acceptance test, and they actually help in implementation instead of slowing us down. When we define user story by ourselves, it fits our needs better. We always have functional user story for which we can create acceptance tests. It is small enough to fit in one sprint, and estimating of such user story is much, much easier. We also improve our planning meetings, spending much more time on deeper analysis of the feature. So user story are easy to understand for everyone. And more time spent on planning returns in faster development. Now we have much less unplanned tasks coming from nowhere in the middle of the sprint. Not only better planning makes development faster. Developers know exactly what needs to do because tests tell them. We need to fulfill only requirements in the test, so we do not waste time on developing unnecessary code. And like you see, we have now much less bugs at the end of the sprint, because if there are some, they are found much faster by our automated tests. And they can be fixed before the sprint ends. Like you see, only 2 bugs. And they are already done. And this graph shows open faults by week. And it's not a joke. Our testers might have much less work with raising faults in a tool because there are no faults or they are fixed quickly. Our tests also tell us where to find an issue. For example, when one specific for user story test case is failed. But not everything was so beautiful. We have also problems with ATDD. Acceptance tests are created mainly by testers. It would be better if architects and product owner more eagerly joined workshops. And without developers' cooperation, it's hard to write a good test. And when acceptance tests are created without developers, it is hard for them to use it as a starting point of implementation. Good tests speed up implementation because developers need to implement only the requirements in the tests. Another problem is that tests are often created during sprint, whereas they should be created before the sprint. Sometimes it's because we don't know the content of the next sprint, or we just simply didn't have time to prepare tests. And when some architectural changes is going on in our application, we sometimes receive user stories which is not functional. And as I told before, it is not possible to write acceptance tests for not functional user stories. Sometimes we receive user story that is only focused on user interface, and it is also hard for us to write acceptance tests because we test only application business logic by our automated tests. And when we want to speed up planning, we sometimes forget about important condition of satisfaction. So even if it's late in the afternoon, we need to do planning carefully. It wasn't easy, and it took a lot of time, but we see the benefits of using ATDD in our team. And I'm sure that everyone can make a change, create world-class software, and be happy using acceptance test-driven development. That was the story of my team, Nokia NetAct Software Manager team. Thank you for listening.
Łukasz, thank you very much for your presentation. Now we have time for question. We had a lot of questions. Number one. What do you think about methodology TDD?
DDD. Honestly, I don't know this methodology.
DDD. Delive, deploy.
Delive, deploy.
Explain, please.
Yeah, what
Something new?
No. When I read this,
some mix.
Yeah, divide, deploy. Great. No, by the way,
Who's the author, Krzysztof?
Yeah, I heard about methodology PDD, FDD, fault-driven development, something like that. Honestly, I must say that it wasn't easy in our team to introduce this ATDD because of this. Dawaj, szybko, quick. It isn't easy, but we needed to show arguments to our managers that we will have less bugs, that we will have less faults, and they look at us not so well. But after time, honestly, I must say that on the beginning, only one person, one developer, and one tester starts to implement this ATDD, whereas others just doing the way like they did before. And in the time, more and more people see the benefits. So I know that there is a problem in companies that this is DDD, and I encourage you to try to convince first your manager and that this is a good way and that you can give a try. Not whole team can try this ATDD, but like in my case, 2 or 3 people on the beginning, and you can try it. That it's worth.
Okay, thank you. Number 2 question. What are the prerequisites to implement correctly ATDD in a project? How to scale it up to organization?
Yeah, this is a good question because I showed you ATDD in my team. That was a team of 25 people, and it is problem. And we are cross-functional team, so we've got testers, developers, and specifiers in one team. But in organization, it is problem when there is a team of testers, team of developers, and team of specifiers. And the answer is not simple for that. You need to communicate better. To try to communicate, for example, if you are a tester in the tester team, you need to try to communicate with developer, with specifier. Try to talk with your manager. Currently in Nokia, I'm in that department that I'm struggling with that problem, and we need to think about whole department, whole company as a one team, and this is much harder, I know it, but it's worth a try.
Thank you. I think the last question, number 3, is how many testers, comparing to developers number, do you need in the team to successfully start ATDD?
Our scrums was 6 person and 5 developers and 1 tester. So we've got 5 scrum and 1 tester for each scrum. So this is, I think that when it will be 6-1, it's okay. Something like that.
Okay. Łukasz, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, big hands for our superstar Łukasz Kumaszka.